Transformers come in a variety of shapes and sizes, ranging from the very large to the very small. Now, there really isn't much difference between the job done by a large substation transformer and the job done by this small transformer. When it comes right down to it, regardless of size or shape, transformers do basically the same thing. A transformer is an electrical device that transforms or changes the value of voltage and current. A transformer that changes voltage from lower values to higher values is usually referred to as a step-up transformer. Step-up transformers are commonly used in transmission systems. In a distribution system, however, you're most likely going to find step-down transformers. That is, a transformer that changes voltage from higher values to lower values. In this part of the program, what we want to do is give you a basic understanding of how transformers work and teach you how to recognize the typical types of transformers you'll find in distribution systems. We'll use this simplified diagram to identify the basic elements in a transformer and to explain how transformers work. In general, the transformers you'll find in distribution systems have three elements in common: a metal core, a primary winding, and a secondary winding. Voltage is applied to the transformer through the primary winding and taken off the transformer through the secondary winding. When voltage is applied to the primary winding, the resulting current creates a magnetic field around the core that induces a voltage in the secondary winding. The ratio between the number of turns in the primary winding and the number of turns in the secondary winding determines whether the voltage induced in the secondary has a higher or lower value than the applied voltage. In most distribution transformers, the voltage induced in the secondary winding is lower than the voltage applied to the primary winding. In this example of a step-down transformer, one end of the primary winding is grounded. A tap coming off the center of the secondary winding is also grounded. This results in one primary lead coming into the transformer and two secondary leads, plus a ground coming out of the transformer. We'll use this simplified illustration to show you how the basic elements are arranged in a typical pole-top transformer. You can recognize this type of transformer by the cylindrical housing, the large primary bushing on the top of the housing, and three secondary bushings on the side of the housing. This illustration is similar to the kinds of transformers you see on many overhead distribution systems. Both the primary and secondary bushings insulate the transformer leads as they pass through the housing. The primary winding in this transformer is supplied with primary distribution voltage from a distribution line on the pole. Primary voltage is applied through this lead that runs through the primary bushing to one end of the primary winding. The other end of the winding is tied to the transformer's housing, and an external ground is applied. The secondary, or utilization voltage induced in the secondary winding is tapped off the transformer through leads that pass through the secondary bushings on the side of the housing. In this example, the lead passing through the middle bushing on the secondary side is grounded. The leads on either side are hot. The secondary leads are usually connected to wires that form a secondary bus, which supplies consumers with electricity through service drops. Here's a typical pole-top transformer. Let's identify the elements that allow you to recognize this component as a transformer. First, it has a large primary bushing, on top, connected to a distribution line. Second, smaller secondary bushings are located on the side of the housing. Finally, the wires coming off the secondary bushings form a secondary bus and service drop going to a customer. Now that you have a basic understanding of how transformers work, and you've seen a typical example of a pole-top transformer, let's look at some other examples of transformers that you may encounter on the job. This is also a pole-top transformer. It looks and works exactly like the one we just discussed, except instead of one large bushing on the top of the housing, this one has two. This bushing allows the primary lead to connect to the primary winding, just like we saw earlier. However, instead of having the other end of the primary winding grounded through the transformer housing, this type of pole-top transformer is grounded through this second bushing. Both single bushing and two bushing transformers perform the exact same job. They just look a little different. In some cases, the load demand and equipment used by a consumer requires the use of a three-phase transformer. In an overhead system, three single-phase transformers can be connected together to form a three-phase transformer. Of course, not all transformers are located overhead on utility poles. In areas that have underground distribution systems, pad mounting is a common method of installing transformers. This three-phase transformer is housed in a rectangular-shaped metal cabinet that sits on a concrete pad. All connections for the transformer are concealed within the cabinet. Single-phased pad-mounted transformers are similar in shape, but their cabinets are usually smaller in size. Inside the cabinet are the primary bushings and the secondary bushings. Somewhat less common, but still used in many underground distribution systems, are subsurface transformers. Subsurface transformers are installed underground in specially constructed vaults for protection. In shape, subsurface transformers resemble single-phase pole-top transformers. However, both the primary and secondary bushings are usually located on the top of the transformer housing. So far, we've looked at various examples of transformers found in distribution systems. Earlier in your training, you saw several examples of substation transformers. Substation transformers are usually rectangular in shape and mounted on concrete pads in a substation. Their primary and secondary bushings are usually located on the top of the transformer housing. Substation transformers are much larger than pole-top or pad-mounted transformers. The reason for this is that substation transformers are designed to handle higher voltages than distribution transformers. Substation transformers are easy to recognize because they're always located in substations and they have large bushings. Transformers are a very important part of a T&D system because they change the value of voltage and current to meet the specific needs of the system. In this portion of the program, we've given you some basic information about how transformers work, and we've shown you some typical examples of the types of transformers that you'll see on the job. In the next part of the program, we'll go on to look at voltage regulators and capacitors.